Alrighty, great. So thanks again for having me. And before I start, I like to experiment with things and try things. So if you would like to check out my slides page, it's actually at myslides.page. And there, the slides will be in sync. So as I'm scrolling through them, they'll also update on your end. Higher quality because there's no video compression, and it's as big as your monitor. So if you want to check that out, have some interactive examples I would like you to play with as well. And now this is super beta, so I'm going to be using speech recognition. And so it's actually, as I'm saying things, it will put it like in a little speech bubble above my little avatar on the website. So hopefully you get a chance to check that out. Let me start some things on my end. So if someone could put I had my slides.page in the chat, but before I got to press enter, everything kind of went away. And I'm scared to put anything back.
I'll put it in. I'll put it in for you, Dwayne.
Awesome. Thank you very much. All right, so let us get started. Okay, so we're starting there. Let me move this over. And now hopefully you can see my screen with my slides and with this little speech recognition button happening, hopefully. And again, disclaimer, it's super beta. All right, so now, this, cool. All right, so using web components in your favorite framework / library or not, it's your choice. It's cool either way. As I understand it, January 2021, because the web is always changing. Hi, I'm Dwayne, a JavaScript developer advocate at Vonage. If you're not familiar with Vonage, we are a cloud communication platform. Our APIs allow you to make video and phone calls, send SMS, Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, and Viber messages, and so much more. So like I said, my presentation is about using web components, why and how I use them, and I'm going to show a lot of examples. Let's gotta double check something. All right, so I was not recording. Great. Okay. Okay, so yeah. So now, as a, it goes without saying that, oh, my bad. So like I said, my presentation is about using web components, why and how I'm using them, and show a lot of examples. So I'm hoping by the end, you become a part of the fandom. And it goes without saying that as a JavaScript developer advocate, I'm a fan of the DOM. And I live in a van called DOM. And I pretty much called it DOM so I could make this following joke. So hopefully it's funny. Light DOM, shadow DOM, virtual DOM. Now, if you're not familiar with web components, Anna Sidri gave a really good talk on the basics at a previous JS Monthly meetup. And there's the link to the video there. I've also been writing a series of blog posts that compares various tools to help create web components and actually build and publish a web component and use them, which goes deeper into what I will be presenting today. So you can always find those at that site there. But for the TLDR, think of a web component as your own black box in your application. The user of your web component can pass in properties and set attributes. Then they can even call methods you want them to use, that you want to let them use. If your web component emits some custom events, the user can listen for those in their application. Now, I like to build projects, as you can see, like a lot of projects. And one thing I don't like is having to keep creating or recreating about pages for each project, especially if they are built using different technologies. Ain't nobody got time for that. So for my newer projects, I've been using a web component, Dwayne-made. And what happens is I fetch data from an endpoint on each project and pass that into the web component that changes some of the sections pertaining to that project. Another reason why I like web components is that they're almost like the Swiss Army knife. You can have the same component for multiple uses. So think of the humble input element. I've always found it amazing that just by changing the type attribute, its functionalities can change so much. So for example, we have the button checkbox, and now the color. The color has always been pretty amazing to me. Like just changing that to color, and you have a color picker. That's amazing. And then of course this one is super cool. Now imagine if you had to create a date picker every time. Like this is great to me. So it's the small things that really get me excited. And then of course you can choose files. There's the radio, range, and then of course the OG text. So now what we're going to do is we try to accomplish both features in the web component example used in the blog series that I mentioned earlier. And here it is. It's a keypad element. And so it was created using OpenWC and Material Web Components. Some of the properties and attributes on there are the you can customize the placeholder text. You can set the buttons on the pad or the keys. And then you can set text for start and end action buttons. And then you can also show or hide the asterisk and hashtag keys or the pound sign keys, as well as the input box. Now there's a method on there. So there's the create action method, and it lets the web component know that an action has started. And as far as custom events, you can listen for the digit added, which is sent when a button is pressed. There's the digit sent, that's sent when the start action is pressed. And then finally, the action ended is sent when the end action button is pressed. Hopefully that all made sense. Okay, so now let's get into the first example. Let's start with vanilla JavaScript. Now, first, we need to load our web component. For this example, we will be using a CDN. So I'm using unpackage. There's so many, like we spoke about before, there's a lot of different new technologies out there. And so along with the web component, we will also load any polyfills that we need. So that lines 1 through 5 accomplish that. And cool. So go ahead and play around with the component. You can actually go ahead and press buttons in there, and you kind of see it pop up. And it doesn't do anything now. So, oh, it does do something. I totally forgot about it. So, right now it's as if it's a basic dialer. So it's kind of like, do you want to call it? And then you say yes, and then it turned to cancel. Then you can end it. So that's the basics of the web component that we built for the blogs. All right. So now next we place our web component on the page, and it's actually, if anything that you get from this is that your custom element is just like a regular element. So it's like an H1 tag or a paragraph tag. And so you can place it on your page as if it's just like that. And so I have it here so you can see it. So I had to add spaces around the brackets because my slides were trying to actually load the web component. So you can see here, Dwayne's -keypad, got a placeholder, and that's what's showing up there. And we're going to get into more examples of that. But continuing on, now, then we need to get a reference to the web component. And so we're doing that there. Like I said, it's just a regular element. So we're going to do a document.query selector and that. You can do, if you put an ID there, you can do, okay, I knew something like that was going to happen. This is what happens when you experiment with stuff. Okay, cool. All right, and so yeah, we're getting the query selector. Make sure I don't go back again. All right. Oh, almost did it again. Oh, okay, I do not like, okay. All right, so we're just going to keep on going. All right, cool. So now, all right, so we got the reference to the web component. And then here we are listening for the digit added custom event. Now this will call the keypad's create action method. And then if we wanted to programmatically change the action text, the button, we can do that like this. All right, so now let's take a look at some other options. So let's see. Now this is a code pen. And so we saw the default function there. Let me. All right, so now you refresh this. So now you see the action text, the button has changed to call. And now see right here, remove the actual display and the asterisk and the hashtag buttons. And now one that's kind of like pushing the limits, which is super cool, kind of shows the versatility of web components, at least hopefully. Now let's say if you wanted to create like a little gamepad, and so you'd be able to kind of move your thing around, that you can press this for the fire, and then you can have like how many times the person crashed and end the game. Cool. All righty. Now up next, we're going to go in alphabetical order here. So we're going to start off with Angular because I don't want to show any favoritism or anything. So now this image is from custom-elements-everywhere.com. And they do the work of making sure frameworks and custom elements can be BFFs. They run various tests and give a score based on how well a framework works with web components. So first up is Angular. And you can see that from the results and how it handles data going into and events coming out of a web component, they are BFFs. Now let's explore this more with an example. All right, so now in this example, the keypad component is used to enter a user's answer to a question. So it's kind of like a gamepad quiz thing. And then go ahead and give it a try. Do you know the answer? So in what year was the first release candidate published of Angular? Because it's Angular answers, so it's referring to Angular. Now let me, where's the mouse? Here we go. All right, so let's say if it's 1. Submit the answer. Oh, wrong answer. And since I actually wrote the question, I know it's 3. Oh, Mac. Okay. There, we got it right. Congrats. So now let's talk about how all this was kind of put together. So now first, we install the keypad web component. Now I tried to link to a CDN, but I couldn't get it to work. So if anyone is really familiar with Angular and has any suggestions, please let me know. Now in the app.module.ts file, we need to let Angular know that if it comes across any elements in the DOM that it doesn't recognize, not to worry, we got it. That is accomplished with custom elements schema. I'm really hoping I don't go back again. So that's that's here. So we're importing that here at the top, and it's coming from Angular core. And then, so we import that from Angular core, and then it include it in the module schema, which you can see right here. Then we place our keypad component in the app.component.html file. Now notice the hashtag keypad. That will help us get a reference to the element. Those familiar with Angular will recognize the square brackets, which denote a one-way binding to a property or attribute of the component, and the parentheses, for one-way binding to events coming from the web component. So you see we have the keys, placeholder, action text, and then just to show that you can statically, if you set it just to a string, you can do that there. So if it's not linked to like a variable that you want to change. And then the digits sent, we're listening for that custom event. Cool. Then we place our keypad component into app.component.html file. Oh, wait, I just said that. Okay. Okay. Again, Apple. Okay, cool. So here we go. Yes, now in the app.component.ts file, we import element ref, view child, and our web component. And I don't want to scroll on here because it's going to mess up again. But as you can see here, we have the component, view child, element ref from Angular core, and then we're importing our web component right there. All right. Now, we use the view child decorator to find the keypad component using that hashtag keypad that I mentioned earlier. And then we create a keypad component reference of class element ref. And that's being done on line 31. Right there. Okay, go back. Okay, and then also you can see that we're setting the keys, the action text, and the placeholder. So we're setting those properties as well. Now, this here on line 42 will call the cancel action method of the keypad component. And so make sure to include, so we see this dot keypad, and then right here is important, native element, and then the method that you want to call. And that the native element comes from element ref. So that lets Angular know, okay, this element on the page has a method called cancel action. Okay. Now here we are programmatically setting the properties that were set initially from before, and that's pretty much it. Getting a web component working in an Angular project. And so see we have it here. So just this dot equals whatever you like it to be. Great. Up next in alphabetical order once again is React. And as you can see, the relationship with web components is a rocky one. The issues lie with how React handles data and events. React stringifies data going into the web component. So for strings, that's fine. But everything else like objects or arrays, or they're considered rich data, that can cause problems. Like the infamous object. I don't know how many people have actually dealt with React. You think you passed in something, and on the other end, it comes out as object. That's why. So, and as for events, React has its own synthetic event system. So it can't listen to the native DOM and those events. So let's see what we need to do to get things working properly. Now, our keypad web component will be used in a React application as a dialer to make phone calls and then save the contact when completed. And so you can give it a shot. And no, you cannot actually make phone calls right now, but we go through how to actually make that happen in the blog posts using the Vonage voice API. So now go ahead. So let me down here. Hopefully I don't go back again. There it is. So we can see here's the dialer in our React Rolodex. All righty. Call. So we assume that the call went through, then we can hang up and ask us for a name. And everything is in local storage. So, and there we go. And we can edit, delete it, and select it to bring it back into there. Cool. So hopefully you're playing around with that. All right. Now, so we're going to give examples using different versions of React. And here's an example for versions older than 16.3, because there may be some legacy code and you want to put in your web component so that when you upgrade, you don't have to rewrite all those things. And so now, like before, we load our web component from a CDN. You could also use npm install and import it, as we did with the Angular example. Now, we place the web component. So here is the web component in the render function. Now, notice that it has, towards the end here, a ref keypad. And it works like the hashtag keypad from the Angular example. And it lets React know to pay attention to this element. Now, on line 41 here, then in the component did mount section, here we're adding an event listener for the web component's digits sent custom event. So let me move this over here. So let me highlight that. So it moves over right there. So you can see it's a digit sent event that's coming from our web components. And then, cool. So now notice the this.refs.keypad syntax right here. Now, if we had set the ref equal to, let's say, example, then it would be this.refs.example. And now you can use the same syntax to call methods on the elements. So we're doing that here. So this.refs.keypad create action. Now, here is how you would set a property programmatically. Here you can pass in the rich data that we mentioned earlier, but right now we're just passing in the string. Now, if you're using version 16.3 or later, you may want to use create ref. Now, the way it's done in this example, so the way it was done in the previous example, 16.3 or earlier than 16.3, the example there would be considered legacy and will probably be removed in later versions. So kind of make sure before you start using web component, which version you're using. So now let's look at the example. And just like before, bring in our web component, just like that. And then we add it to the render function again, but notice the ref has changed. So let me scroll over. As you can see here now, the ref is no longer a string. And so this is because of how React is creating the reference. And so now it's using create ref, as you can see right here on line 18. Now, the way to add event listeners and call methods is also a little different. And so as you can see before, now it says this.keypad.current. And that was different from before. All right. And then, so now this also carries over into setting properties. And it's also this.keypad. Instead of like this.ref.keypad, now it's this.keypad.current. So that's the difference there. All right. And so, as I mentioned before, the web is always changing and frameworks and libraries are no different. So kind of keep aware of where your versions are. But the one cool thing is that your web component isn't changing. It's just how it's being referenced. So now, as of React 16.8, webhooks were introduced, and they help with a lot of heavy lifting. So let's see how we can use them. Load the web component from CDN or npm install again. And like the previous examples, place the web component in the render function. But again, notice a slight difference in the ref property. Now, the only real difference in between React versions is the way reference to the web component is created and used. So if you look here on line 102, now see, it doesn't have the this dot anymore there. So it's just keypad. All right. So now, so in this case, we're going to be using hooks to create the reference. So here is the use ref hook, and that creates the reference. And then in use effect, in the use effect hook, you add the event listeners. And then here's how to call the create action custom event. So again, it's keep. So before it was this.keypad.current, but since we're using hooks, it's just keypad.current create action. So a slight difference from the one before, but it's doing a lot more things under the hood. Okay, and so now if we want to set a property on the web component, this is how we do it. Pretty much the same thing, just without the this dot from version 16.3 up. Cool. So now, like I said before, I go into more depth into the blog post I wrote. And then we even build a working dialer that can make phone calls using the Vonage voice API. Now, finally, let's talk about Vue. According to custom-elements-everywhere.com, using web components in a Vue application should be smooth sailing. So let's take a look at some examples. In our Vue application, the key component will be used to enter in a security code to open a vault, or should I say Vue alt? Huh? Anyone? Fine. All right, give it a try. So you see the security code there. Let me, where's my mouse? So let's go with 654. Let's see if that's right. Oh, nope, wrong code. And then it's 1, 2, 3, 4, the most secure passcode ever. No one ever thinks of that. Enter success. And then we have a minion there, telling you succeeded. All right, so now, just like before, we start by loading the web component and putting the element in the application. So that's what line 1 through 6 is doing right now. Notice that the ref property is just like in React. So ref equals something. Vue has a similar way of binding to properties and events, just like Angular, except using a colon for a v or vbind and an @ symbol. Let me highlight it over here so you can see it. So here is, cool. All right. Here's the colon placeholder. And so that's going to bind to the placeholder variable. And then digits, so there's the @ symbol in front of digits - sent, because that digits - sent is the custom event that comes from the web component. And you listen for events in Vue with the @ sign or v-on. Great. So now again, as with Angular, we need to tell Vue not to worry about any elements in our application that it doesn't know about. So in Vue 2, we use ignored elements. And it's an array that contains strings and or regular expressions that expose the tag names of the web components. So it is then passed into the Vue configuration so that it knows to ignore those elements. Now here is the initial value for the placeholder property. So we set it as enter security code. And then in the methods section of the Vue app, we call the keypad's cancel action method. And notice the $refs.name, and in this case is keypad, used in the ref tag in the element. And then programmatically set the placeholder is right below there on line 27. And now let's talk about Vue 3, the newer version. So everything starts out the same as in Vue 2, but the way to let Vue know about our web component has changed. It is no longer ignored elements, but is now is custom element. So instead of an array, is custom element expects a function. And so you see here in line 43, let me move over. So it expects a function that describes what to look for. Now also now in Vue 3, the check to see if the element is a web component is done during the template compilation. And that'll be important later. So now, other than that, everything else is the same as in Vue 2. Now, one of the newest additions to Vue is the composition API. It was created to help address some limitations developers were facing as applications grew over time and became more complex. Now, remember when I said that Vue 3 now checks to see if there are any web components during template compilation? So, well, there are two examples. So the two examples before, the Vue 2 and Vue 3, the way they were done, they were known as on-the-fly template compilation. And you can kind of tell when it's not. So when you ever have like a file that ends in .vue, there's a compilation step that needs to turn it into something the browser can understand. So now in this composition API example, Webpack is the compiler. So we need to look for the Webpack. We need to look for the web components in the Webpack configuration. So now there's different sorts of compilers that Vue uses that you can use for Vue. So just look for like the config file. And so you'll add this bit of code here. So that's what that's doing, is letting Webpack know anytime you see this, return the custom element so that Vue knows not to worry about it and that we know what we're doing with it. Now, the ref has grown in the composition API to include tracking other values, not just DOM elements. So it now needs to be imported and initialized inside setup. Right there we go. So yeah, so you can see right there, we're importing the ref from Vue, and then we're setting up the keypad with a null initially. So now notice that, oh, here we go. Cool. So now if you notice here, hopefully I don't mess this up. If you notice the dot value here, whenever we're setting either the placeholder or activating the cancel action method. So that's just a thing to kind of make sure, notice if it's not working, make sure you have the dot value. And then that's it. So we've just gone through using the same web component in different configurations with different functionality in different environments. So I hope that gets you interested enough to learn more about web components. If it did, I invite you to join the ride. And thanks. So if you'd like a deeper dive into what I presented, you can find the blog post here at dwane.in/Vonage. And lifelong.dev is my website. So if you'd like to get in contact, and here is a link to our developer documentation. And then also here is a coupon code for 10 euros to start you off to build something cool. Just press that and it'll show you the code. I don't want to show it on here. And then, yeah, thanks again.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Dwayne. That was awesome. I mean, that was quite a whistle-stop tour of a lot of different approaches. So, yeah, thanks for squeezing that in. And do you know what? It's the kind of talk that I personally been waiting for ages. I really think web components solve a lot of, long-standing problems for us developers. And I think a lot of people have struggled to understand how to actually integrate them into their UI framework of choice. So that was super useful. There was a couple of questions in the chat. So if those of you that asked questions in the chat want to unmute and ask Dwayne directly, please go for it. Chris, I think you had a question.
Yeah, hi. You mentioned at the start you're loading these in via a CDN. I was wondering if there was a performance impact for that, because I read the other day that loading Google fonts in via CDN is actually negative for performance.
It all depends on your use case. So that's what's cool about web components. You can do it both ways. So whatever your use case is, so that would depend on the CDN pretty much. So if you have like your own CDN is dedicated, that might be may fit your needs, because if you do that, then you don't actually have to keep, let's say you update that web component quite a bit. So anytime you'd have to, if you ever updated it, then you would have to update your packages and install it again if you did an npm install. Whereas if you do a CDN, you can do that. But if you know something that's going to be there for a while and you're going to keep that version, then you might as well like npm install.
Okay.
So web components are very versatile, which is a thing that I hope I got across.
Yeah, definitely. And it was a really good question, because the beauty of them, obviously, or anything like this that can be easily distributed across different applications comes with that. Do you do it at runtime or at build time? When do you request the thing, and how do you keep it up to date? So good question, good answer. Okay, so who else asked a question? AK, I can see yours.
Yeah, hi there, and thanks a lot, Dwayne, for your presentation.
Oh, thank
I
you for
just want to
paying attention.
check, have you, I know you showed building the web components from scratch. There are use cases, say, if in a company, you say you're using Angular, you got reusable Angular components, you merge with another company that has React, they've got reusable components, and you want to start, you don't want to build from scratch, but you want to convert current components into web components so you can use across the board. So Angular has like Angular
Angular
elements.
elements. Yep. It's
So
pretty
I
cool.
just want to know if you found any sort of limitations on this conversion pattern. So if you're converting stuff from Angular components to web components, using it in React and converting a React component or a Vue component into web components and using it across frameworks.
Mhm.
Are there sort of limitations you found that actually say X kind of component won't work? Converting native components you already have built into web components, can you pretty much convert any kind of component into web component and use across frameworks? Or some frameworks, it's like actually you can't use this type of component?
So like you mentioned, Angular has Angular elements. And so that's a way of doing that. I think Vue has one as well. I'm not quite too sure about React because React is more like a library. So it just handles kind of like the UI stuff. So I'm not sure if there's one there. But the thing is, now for your example, if you already have all these things in Angular and you want to convert it over to React or what have you, it may, depending on how much stuff there is, it may be easier just to go from using Angular elements. But then the thing is, you kind of like bring along the whole Angular framework with it, because it still because you still need Angular to kind of decipher what's happening. Whereas if you're just creating native web components, it's just using native APIs that come with the browser. So again, like with any developer question, it depends.
Yeah, because our scenario is not sort of our choice. It's just the business grows, you merge, and every company you merge with has their own JS framework. So well, let's move to web components, and then you get this problem.
So now what you could probably do is carry over what you have now in using Angular elements, and then you create any new ones, just use
native
vanilla.
web component.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then you can kind of go back and recreate them as you have time.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Oh, no, thank you.
I think that might be all the questions. Well, it's all the questions that I can see in the chat. Does anyone else want to ask a question? We've got a couple more minutes.
I was going to ask a question. How do you deal with like styling and if you've got different frameworks like Sass, or you just kind of take the CSS, or you want to customize it in different applications? I suppose, is it just a similar sort of thing you can import it?
Yeah, so what you can do is, because there's actually, depending on what you're using to kind of create the web components, because I go through a bunch of tools and things that help make it easier. So you can actually, because there's like the layer, like the shadow layer. So anything you do inside of the web component, so like stays within the web component. But there are ways to be able to apply styling to the web component. So you can have it where you don't want, because normally you don't want the styling to leak out of your web component. And then you're able to, because again, it's just like a regular DOM element. And so you can, apply styles to it if you want. And so there's different ways of making that happen.
Yeah, I mean, one of the beauties of web components is that they are completely encapsulated, right? They're protected from one another. But you could theme using Sass and have them inherit, right? But still have their own styles within them. I think it's kind of nice that you can just basically put a web component in a completely different context, and it should look identical, right? It should work exactly the same.
Hopefully all of this lets people look more into, because the more people into web components, the more people that ask questions, and then it can kind of grow and get better and, easier and, more useful for everyone.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's been a topic of many a meetup and many a discussion online, right, about whether they're really going to take off or not. And they kind of never really hit the big time. But I think, talks like yours are really going to help with that. I think maybe it's a slow burner.
Well, it's always good to be, then flame out quick, kind of, so it's kind of keep it consistent. And but yeah, so if anybody has any questions or anything, please feel free to reach out and stuff. So thanks once again.